Hello. One of my viewers asked me a little while back now if I could do a tutorial video, so provide a template and then talk through the process of engraving that onto the glass. Now, it's taken me a little while to figure out how I could attach a template document to a YouTube video. Sorry about that. But I think I've got that sorted out now. Please let me know if it doesn't work. So in this video, what I'll be doing is talking through in detail the process of engraving that image onto the glass. The image I've picked for this engraving tutorial is a holly leaf. Now, I chose that one because it's a fairly simple shape and a good one to start with if we're going to be working through this together. But in order to produce a template, the first thing I have to do is understand what a holly leaf looks like. So I took the dog for a little walk to look at the bushes that grow near my house. And actually holly leaves, the different bushes, they're all quite different. Some of them are quite flat and the spikes are on the same sort of plane as the leaf. Some of them are much more spiky and the spikes point up and down from the plane of the leaf. Older leaves sometimes have very few spikes on at all, but they do have a few things in common. Usually the leaf is longer than it's wide, maybe 1.5 times as long as it's wide. And most importantly, for our engraving, the veins on the leaf tend to be lighter in colour than the body of the leaf. And that makes a difference to the technique we use in engraving it. So having sorted that out, I sat down and drew out a fairly simple template. And as I say, I've attached that hopefully as a PDF document in the description below. I've put it on there in a number of different sizes. Hopefully you'll find one that suits for your piece of engraving. When I made the video on the bits and bars you need to get as a beginning engraver, I suggested you would need 3 spherical diamond bars in different sizes, a rat's tail diamond, a green silicon carbide stone, a white Arkansas stone if you can get it, and a rubber polishing bit. So since I said that 90% of your engraving you could probably do with those bits and bars, those are the ones we'll be using for this tutorial. And the next thing I have to sort out is transferring my template onto my glass. Now I've chosen today to use a fairly inexpensive standard wine glass to engrave on. I have the advantage that I can simply stick the image to the inside of the glass and engrave from there. If you're using flat glass, you can do the same. If you want to engrave this onto a bottle, you'll need to use something like carbon paper to transfer the image on, and I covered that in one of my previous videos, the one on engraving on mirrors has that on it. Or you could just draw it out. I mean, it's not that difficult a shape. You can draw it out by hand, but the way I will be doing this is cutting out the template and sticking it to the inside of the glass. The only complication in that is that the template itself is printed out onto flat paper and the glass has got curves. So inevitably when you try to fit the template into the glass, it's going to bend a little bit. Because I know it's going to do that, when I cut out the template, I cut it quite close to the edges. And if there are any bits where I think the paper is still going to want to bend or twist to fit into the glass, I'll put little slits into it to make it easier to do that. Having done that, I just position the template where I think I want it to go inside the glass and stick it in place. In this case, I've used a bit of sticky tape, but you could use blue tack, sticky stuff, whatever you have. Having got the template into place, I can head off to the workbench and start engraving. You might want to go over these lines before you start engraving with something like a Sharpie pen or a China graph pencil just to make it easier. But because it's such a simple shape, I'm just starting with the medium-sized spherical diamond bar, going round the external lines on the leaf and just marking those in first into the glass. Now I'm taking my time here, although you'll probably see later on that even doing that I do make one or two little mistakes, but nothing that can't be fixed. I have it's a Dremel 3000 I use for the engraving. I have that set to about a 6 setting on it, which is just a middle speed. But it works quite well at this stage. And having put in the outline of the leaf, I'm going over it and putting in the main veins. That's the main vein up the middle of the leaf, and then the side ones that go out from the middle out to each spike, out to each point on the leaf. And I repeat that process on the other leaf until each leaf is outlined, but with no detail. The next stage for me is to start marking in the berries. I've changed to the largest spherical bit that I have, and I'm going round for each berry and almost creating like a little donut shape. So going round in a small circle to give me the engraved size and shape of the berry. But doing it this way, the central part of the berry stays just a little bit higher. That's actually important later on. But at this point you probably won't see why, but it is important later on. But those little circular shapes let me start marking in the berries. And when I take off the template, you'll be able to see it a bit more clearly. And you can almost see the donut effect there. Now those berries, I want them to be a little bit bigger and a little bit rounder. So I'm just going back over them again the same way, with a circular motion, deepening it slightly and making them a little bit rounder, a little bit larger until I'm happy with the effect of them. Now I've turned off the water dripper at this point. I had the water dripper going for working with the diamond bar, but I don't usually use it when I'm working with stones, and this is a green silicon carbide stone I'm using now. I'm using that to fill in the main body of the leaf. The reason for using the silicon carbide stone, it produces a slightly darker finish than the diamond bar does. It's only a tiny amount, but it's very slightly darker. So using this, I'm not taking off all the lines of the veins that I put in before. I'm not cutting as deeply as the diamond bar did, but it's allowing me to fill in the leaf and just create that plane of the shape of the leaf. And I have to fill in all of these areas on both leaves before moving on to the next stage. This is just like colouring in when you were little, colouring in a picture. You want to try and get up to the edges without going over them. That'll take you back. You have an advantage here though, because the outside lines were cut with a diamond bar, which means they are just that little bit deeper than the glass that surrounds them. So with a little care, it's possible to get right up to the edge, even with what is, I suppose, a fairly big green silicon carbide stone, without spoiling it by going over the edges. But if you do go over the edges a little bit, don't worry too much. Just make your leaf a little bit bigger and you'll probably be fine. Now I have speeded this up a little bit just to make it less boring for you. This is at double speed, so it took a little bit longer in real life, and it is worth taking your time and being careful, because there's nothing worse than ruining your engraving by engraving a bit you didn't want to engrave. And as a last step, I just go over the engraving looking for any little bits that might have missed, any little dark bits. Now, some areas on this image I'm going to want to end up being quite dark. They're in shadow. And in my head, the light is coming down from the top right. So what I've done is I've taken a little white Arkansas stone, and those areas that I think are going to be in the deepest shadow, so the bottom left-hand edge of each berry, for example, I'm pre-polishing those with the white Arkansas stone. I also pre-polish those little raised bits that were in the middle of each berry that we left from doing those little circles, the little donut shapes, and the areas beside the vein, which in my head are going to be the darkest areas in the finished engraving. Pre-polishing with this white Arkansas stone smooths out some of the marks left by the green silicon carbide stone and makes it easier then to come back and polish that down to quite a dark tone at the next stage in the engraving. So I have to go around each leaf, each berry, and just decide which bits I think are going to be darker once it's all done. I see in my head the light is going to come from the top right hand side, so it's usually the bottom left hand sides of things that I'm pre-polishing here, and the sort of bottom half underside of this bottom leaf particularly. Once that's all done, I can come back in with my rubber polisher and go over those areas. Now you'll see here that the bits that I pre-polished, the shadow appears in them quite quickly. They get dark very easily with the rubber polisher. Using this technique, we're going to end up with 3 tones in effect on the leaf. The bits that are pre-polished and then polished with the rubber will be the darkest areas. Bits that weren't pre-polished but are then polished with the rubber give us a mid-tone, and the lightest areas will be those that were only engraved with the green silicon carbide stone. So fairly simply we can get a good range of tonal values into the leaf. And I just have to work my way around picking out those areas where I think there's going to be shade, just taking a few minutes to polish them out to get the tone that I want in there. And once I'm finished with the leaves, I can go on and do something similar with the berries, polishing out the little dots in the middle of each berry, which are where the flower would have been attached to start with, and then the bottom left hand side of each berry, where I think the shade would be the deepest. And I think you can maybe see there that the centres of the berries come out quite dark. Now the final stage is the finishing up stage. I've taken out my middle-sized spherical diamond again, and I'm going round all the edges, just making sure I've got them nice and crisp and clean, and correcting any mistakes I may have made when I was outlining it from the original template. I don't need to do too much here. The green stone hasn't taken away anything really from the outline. I was just trying to tidy it up and make it as neat as it can be. And repeat that then on the other leaf, where I do have a few more mistakes to correct. Thankfully there's nothing too serious here, so quite easily put right. Once I've finished with the outlines, I'm going to go over those main veins again, the central vein and the main side veins, just to make sure that they're nice and clear in the finished engraving, because you'll remember when we looked at the holly leaves to start with, the veins are lighter than the surrounding leaf. So doing this with the diamond burr should make them a little bit lighter than the tone that's been left with the green silicon carbide stone. For the very final finishing touches, I've moved on to quite a small little rat's tail burr here, because I want these leaves to be very spiky, and having this very fine point on the burr lets me make them much spikier than I could ever manage with the round diamond burr. So I'm just going over each spike and extending it and making it a little bit more pointy looking. And the other thing I'm going to do with this rat's tail burr is put in one or two additional little side veins, not too many, just one or two here and there. Same thing on the next leaf, make them nice and spiky because it is holly. And here is the finished glass. It's quite a pretty little image. The little bit of shading with the polishing rubber just helps to bring a little bit of interest onto the leaf, and the little berries look quite spherical. If you're doing this engraving, take your time to try to get the edges as crisp, as clear as you can. I know that sometimes, depending on the burr you're using, they have a nasty tendency to chip a little bit along the edges. If that's happening, try maybe reducing the speed a little bit. And you could always go around it afterwards with something like a little white Arkansas stone to just try and smooth that out. But a little bit of care in the initial bit of engraving and you should manage to reduce that chipping. If you would like, you can do something like adding a little bit of text onto the glass, or maybe repeat the image around the glass, and you can make quite a nice little gift for someone. See, these glasses are very inexpensive, but they look quite nice when they're done. So hopefully you've found that tutorial helpful. If you have, as I say, please click the thumbs up, and if you really don't like it, click the thumbs down and I'll know not to do any more like this. But if you like it, let me know. As I say, I hope you find it useful. I hope you've enjoyed the process, and I hope you'll join me again for my next video. Thank you.